As I sit here, trying to find the right words to express the pain and chaos that have taken over our lives, I can't help but feel a profound sense of guilt and sadness. It all started when my husband confronted me after conducting a DNA test on our firstborn son. I had no idea that this confrontation would uncover the secrets and lies I had been hiding for so long. I need to admit the obvious, I am at fault here, and I accept that I am the one who caused the situation. I know it's my responsibility. But honestly, I'm struggling to cope with all of this. I'm reaching out here in the hope that someone can offer advice on how to mend the trust I've broken with my betrayed spouse. This all happened back in 2016, a whole 6 years ago. At that time, I was young and made a terrible mistake. John and I had been together for 2 years, and we shared a history of growing up in the same hometown, being part of the same circle of friends since childhood and falling in love during high school. Our love has endured since then, and we've remained together. After graduating from college, my best friend Janet got married to her boyfriend, and I had the honor of being her bridesmaid. Meanwhile, my boyfriend and I decided to wait a bit longer so we could save up enough money for our wedding the following year. Then, about 6 months after Janet's wedding, my phone rang, and it was her calling. My heart sank a little when I answered because I could tell something was wrong from the way she was sobbing. Her voice was shaky and filled with tears as she struggled to speak. It had been half a year since her wedding, and I knew whatever she was about to tell me couldn't be good news. As she took a moment to gather her emotions and find her voice, the words she finally managed to say were like a heavy blow to my heart. She explained that she and her husband had visited a doctor and they had received heartbreaking news. She had a medical condition that made it impossible for her to have children. I remembered how adoption had come up in our conversations before, and I knew that wasn't an option for them either. The weight of this revelation hung heavily in the air, and I could hear the despair in her voice. It was an agonizing moment, and I could only imagine the pain and confusion she must have been experiencing at that very moment. I really wanted to be there for her, to support her in any way possible. In her sad state, she suggested that we go out to bars and clubs, hoping that it might offer a temporary escape from the overwhelming emotional turmoil she was going through. I thought perhaps dancing and laughter could bring her some relief, even if only for a little while. So, I gently encouraged her to get dressed, assuring her that we would create a memorable night, even if it meant temporarily setting aside the weight of her recent diagnosis. During our time at the club, we decided to let loose and fully embrace the night. The music blared, the lights flashed in rhythm, and the attention we received from other men provided a momentary break from the heavy burden my best friend was carrying. It felt like a release, a brief escape from the sadness that had consumed her. As the weeks passed, we found ourselves going out more and more often. The attention we received from strangers started to boost our self-confidence. It was as if we were regaining a sense of self-assurance that had been overshadowed by the recent news about my best friend's condition. We laughed, danced, and reveled in the excitement of those nights, treasuring the moments when our worries seemed to fade away. On one of those lively nights, when the music was pounding and the dance floor was packed with people, I pulled my best friend aside. With deep sincerity, I shared with her that since she couldn't have children of her own, I would be willing to be a surrogate mother for her if she ever considered that option. I understood that adoption might not be something her husband readily agreed to, and I wanted to offer her an alternative that could bring hope back into her life. My words brought tears to her eyes, but they were tears of gratitude and relief. My promise brought even more cheer to my best friend, and as a result, we started going out together even more frequently. At that time, I was in a relationship with my current husband, who was understanding and supportive of the close bond between my best friend and me. He knew how much her happiness meant to me and encouraged me to be there for her in any way I could. However, during this period, there was something our partners didn't know. We began to take advantage of our nights out by getting involved with random guys, making out with them, and sometimes even going to their homes with them. Unfortunately, during this time, I found out that I was pregnant. I confided in my best friend and told her that I wanted to terminate the pregnancy because I wasn't entirely sure if the child belonged to my boyfriend. When I shared my decision to remove the pregnancy, my friend went on a passionate speech, trying to convince me to keep the baby. She believed I didn't fully grasp how fortunate I was to have the opportunity to become a mother. She successfully persuaded me to keep the baby. I ended all ties with the guys I had been involved with and focused on my relationship with my boyfriend. My best friend and I also stopped going out together. Although, my friend continued to go out and cheat on her partner, and she was also trying to convince me to continue. After deciding to keep the pregnancy, I reevaluated my life decision and I realized how disgusted I felt with myself, her, and the strangers I had been kissing. Most of all, I was overwhelmed with guilt for betraying the love of my life. I mustered the courage to tell her that I couldn't continue hanging out with her if she was going to persist with her infidelity. She understood my perspective and decided to stop as well. However, despite our moral misgivings, we both chose to keep our actions a secret. Since I didn't want to walk down the aisle while I was pregnant, I convinced my then-boyfriend that we should get married. He believed he was the father, and to some extent, I did too, but I couldn't be certain due to my involvement with multiple men I had met at the club with my best friend. So, my boyfriend and I quickly tied the knot, and my best friend played a supportive role in taking care of me during my pregnancy. A few months after giving birth to my son, my best friend and her husband started experiencing difficulties that eventually led to their divorce. My best friend was heartbroken during that time, and she, as always, wanted to go out and party to cope with her pain. However, I declined her invitation because I didn't want a repeat of what had happened the last time we partied. Instead, we opted for a different approach, visiting lounges, high-class restaurants, enjoying massages, practicing yoga, and indulging in some shopping. This turned out to be more fulfilling than seeking attention from other men, and it helped us maintain our dignity and integrity. Fast forward 6 years, and I've been happily married to my husband. We now have 3 wonderful children, aged 6, 4, and 2 years old. Throughout these years, my friendship with my best friend has remained strong. She soon got into another serious relationship, and I've included her and her partner in our children's birthday parties, Super Bowl games, and couples date nights. My friend and her partner appeared to be content and in a happy relationship, which made me genuinely happy for them. Then, one day, my friend broached the topic of having a baby. She expressed her and her boyfriend's desire to start a family and reminded me of my offer to be a surrogate mother, especially now that I had decided not to have any more children of my own. I was secretly hoping that she would never take me up on my offer, but since she was my friend, I had made her a promise. However, I knew I needed to discuss it with my husband first. So, when my husband returned home, I shared her request with him. He strongly opposed the idea, expressing concerns about the potential risks and suggesting that they should financially support someone else to be a surrogate instead. He mentioned that going through with this sacrifice would place an enormous strain on our family, especially since he desired more children, but my pregnancies had always been challenging for our family. I understood his perspective, but despite my efforts to convince him otherwise, he remained steadfast in his decision. I had to break the news to my friend that my husband didn't support the idea of me being her surrogate mother, and we offered financial assistance to help them find another suitable surrogate. She didn't take this news well and became upset, feeling that I had broken my promise. She left our conversation in a state of distress, even calling me a fake friend. I tried to explain to her that my circumstances and responsibilities had changed since I had made the promise. I felt terrible about how our conversation ended, and when I returned home to my husband and shared my feelings, he was upset that she even expected me to be her surrogate. He told me that I would eventually get over it. Unfortunately, I had underestimated just how upset my husband was about the situation. He had an unexpected encounter with my best friend's partner, and for some reason, he broached the subject with him in what must have come across as a disrespectful manner. An argument ensued, and hurtful words were exchanged. During the heated exchange, my best friend's partner went so far as to suggest that my husband should conduct a DNA test on our oldest son, implying that he might not be the only one who had been intimate with me recently. When my husband confronted me about the argument he had with my best friend's partner, I tried to downplay it, suggesting that my best friend's partner was just trying to hurt him during their argument. I desperately tried to divert my husband's attention, but deep down, I was extremely worried that my past actions were catching up with me. After I had a chance to speak with my husband privately, I immediately called my best friend and demanded to know why she had shared such sensitive information with her partner and how she could betray my trust like that. Although she apologized, I was too upset to accept it. I accused her of making me keep the baby only to use it against me and potentially ruin my life. She tried to explain that it wasn't her intention for her partner to use this information against me, and she claimed that she never told him to do so. She insisted that if my husband hadn't been disrespectful during their argument, her partner would have never revealed this information. Don't get me wrong, I love my son, and if I have to do it over I will still keep him. When I found out that my supposed girlfriend had revealed this information to her partner, I told her that we needed to reevaluate our relationship, as her actions could have potentially jeopardized my marriage. I hung up the phone with her, and she kept calling and texting me, but I chose not to respond. During that time, I felt incredibly anxious around my husband. It was as if I was walking on eggshells, praying that he wouldn't actually go through with the DNA test. 2 weeks went by, and I started to think that things were returning to normal, but unfortunately, I was mistaken. It was an ordinary evening when he returned home, his face etched with solemnity. I sensed that something was awry, but I could never have foreseen the earth-shattering revelation he was about to unleash. We sat down in our living room, his hands trembling as he drew in a deep breath to speak. He looked at me, his voice quivering, a potent mix of anger and hurt evident in his eyes. "I conducted a DNA test on our son," he began, his words hanging heavily in the air, "and the results have come in." A wave of dread washed over me, and perspiration formed on my brow. The secret I had harbored for 6 long years was about to be exposed, and I hadn't anticipated the devastating consequences. Summoning every ounce of strength, I met his gaze, my voice barely escaping as a whisper. "What did the test reveal?" He paused, tears welling up in his eyes, before finally uttering the words that shattered our world. "Our son is not biologically mine." The room seemed to spin as the enormity of his revelation settled in. I had carried this burden for years, unsure if he was the father. Now, the truth had come crashing down around us, and the pain etched across his face was agonizing. In the days that ensued, he moved out of our once happy family home, leaving me to confront the wreckage of our marriage on my own. Overwhelming guilt and shame washed over me as I grappled with betraying the man I loved so deeply and the child we had raised as our own. To compound matters, I couldn't help but harbor resentment towards my closest friend and her partner who were unwittingly embroiled in this mess. I felt betrayed and developed a deep-seated hatred for my best friend. The betrayal by my best friend only intensified the anguish I felt, straining our friendship to the breaking point. I couldn't escape blaming her for the turmoil that had descended upon our lives, even though I understood it was my own actions that set this tragedy in motion. As I look back on those harrowing days, I'm overwhelmed by the remorse and sorrow that continue to consume my heart. The consequences of my choices have irreparably altered the lives of those I hold most dear, leaving us all to pick up the pieces of a once happy family shattered by deception and betrayal. The days that followed his revelation were fraught with tension, anger, and heartache. He couldn't bear to look at me without a deep sense of betrayal, and his desire for a divorce became undeniable. Our home, once filled with joy and affection, had devolved into a battleground of emotions. One evening, after weeks of painful discussions and arguments, he made his intentions clear. Sitting me down with exhaustion etched on his face, he uttered the painful words, "I can't continue this, I want a divorce." My heart ached as those words hung heavily in the air. I had anticipated this moment, but hearing it vocalized made it undeniably real. I empathized with his anger and disappointment, for I had shattered his trust in the cruelest way possible. But the most heartbreaking aspect was his decision concerning our son, who he wanted to distance himself from. The child he believed was his own for years, now faced the devastating rift caused by my actions. Their once strong father-son bond had been irreparably damaged. Witnessing him turn away from a child who had only known him as a father, who had looked up to him with innocent adoration, was heart-wrenching. Matthew was too young to comprehend the complexity of the situation, but he could sense the change in his father's demeanor, and it pained me to see his confusion and hurt. He relocated to a condominium, severing all ties with the life we had painstakingly built together. He was resolute in his determination to move forward without me, with no room for negotiation. The burden of my betrayal, the loss of my husband, and the anguish experienced by the father figure Matthew had cherished weighed heavily on my conscience. As the divorce proceedings commenced, the stark reality of our fractured family became undeniable. I couldn't escape the overwhelming sense of responsibility for the pain and turmoil I had inflicted. In the end, the repercussions of my actions had torn apart our family, leaving wounds that might never fully heal. To this day I haven't spoken to my ex-best friend as I reserve a special hatred for her